My beloved child, your soulmate has been holding their phone for the last several minutes, trying to decide whether this is the moment they finally tell you what just happened. Not tomorrow. Not after they have found better words. Not once everything feels easier to explain. Right now. Because something shifted today, and the strange part is that it did not begin with a dramatic event. There was no loud announcement, no sudden scene that made everyone stop and stare, no obvious warning that this ordinary day was about to become something your soulmate would remember for a very long time. It began quietly. Your soulmate was moving through the same kind of day they have lived many times before. Messages appeared on their screen. Small responsibilities waited for attention. A room needed to be straightened. A decision had to be made. Someone asked a question that barely mattered. Outside, people were moving through streets and doorways, carrying groceries, checking the time, answering calls, thinking about dinner, tomorrow, bills, work, family, and all the little things that make a normal day feel full. Your soulmate was doing the same. At first, you were not the center of their thoughts. That is important. Because what happened later was not created by them sitting around trying to think about you. Your name entered the moment unexpectedly. Their phone vibrated. Once. They glanced at the screen without much interest. It was a message from someone they had spoken with earlier in the day. Nothing unusual about that. But when they opened it, they stopped. The message was short. Almost too short. It said something that made your soulmate read it twice. Then a third time. And after that, they lowered the phone and stared into the room as though something invisible had just walked through the door. The message was not a declaration about you. It was not gossip. It was not some dramatic secret. It contained a simple question. Have you talked to them yet? Your soulmate knew immediately who "them" meant. You. And for some reason, those 5 ordinary words landed differently today. They could have answered instantly. They could have typed, "No." They could have changed the subject. Instead, their thumb hovered above the screen. Something inside them resisted giving the easy answer. Because suddenly the real question was not whether they had spoken to you. The real question was why they had not. Stay with this moment, because that question became the first crack in a wall your soulmate had been pretending was stronger than it really was. They locked the phone. Placed it face down. Walked away. At least, they tried to. For the next several minutes, they occupied themselves with small things. They moved something from one side of the room to another. They checked something that did not need checking. They opened another app. They looked outside. They poured themselves a drink and forgot about it long enough for it to sit untouched. But the question followed them. Have you talked to them yet? Your soulmate told themselves there was no reason to make the moment bigger than it was. People ask questions. Phones light up. Memories appear. Life moves on. Yet something would not move on with them. Because beneath that message was another thought they had been avoiding. What would I actually say if I talked to you now? That was when the day changed. Not because they had the answer. Because for the first time in a while, they allowed themselves to imagine the conversation. Your voice. Your pause. The possibility that you might sound surprised. The possibility that you might already know something had changed. And then a memory returned. It was not one of the obvious memories. Not some huge dramatic scene. It was something smaller. Your soulmate remembered a moment when you noticed something about them that almost everyone else had missed. Maybe they were tired that day. Maybe they were quieter than usual. Maybe they had said they were fine, and you did not challenge them or force them to explain. You simply adjusted. Your tone changed. You gave them space without disappearing. You remembered something they had mentioned days earlier. It was such a small detail that your soulmate had almost forgotten it. Almost. But not completely. And today that memory came back with unusual clarity. That is when they picked the phone up again. They reopened the message. Have you talked to them yet? This time, they answered. Not yet. 2 words. But they did not press send immediately. They stared at the sentence. Then deleted it. Typed another answer. Not yet. I think I need to. That version frightened them a little more, not because anything bad was happening, but because it was honest. They deleted that too. And here is where the unusual detail enters. As they were about to close the conversation, another notification appeared. An old photograph. Their phone had surfaced it automatically from months ago. Your soulmate almost swiped it away. Then they looked. You were connected to that photograph. Maybe you were visible in it. Maybe the photograph captured a place where the two of you had been. Maybe it showed an object, a table, a street, a cup, room, a sunset, some completely ordinary thing that would mean nothing to anyone else. To your soulmate, it meant something. Because the photograph reminded them not merely of where they had been, but of who they were when you were part of that moment. Their expression softened. They zoomed in. Not because there was anything hidden in the picture. Because suddenly they wanted to remember. What did we talk about that day? What was I feeling? Why does this still matter to me? And then another memory appeared. Something you said. Not a promise. Not a dramatic declaration. Just a sentence. Your soulmate could not remember every word perfectly, but they remembered the meaning. You had made them feel that they did not have to perform around you. That stayed. Long after the moment ended, it stayed. Your soulmate put the phone down again, but now ignoring this was becoming harder. The clues were not supernatural signs arranged dramatically around them. They were ordinary things lining up emotionally. A question. An old photograph. A memory. A feeling they had been calling temporary for far too long. And the more your soulmate tried to return to their day, the more one truth kept becoming obvious. They missed the honesty that existed when they talked to you. That realization did not immediately make them reach out. It made them quieter. They sat down. For a while, nothing moved except the screen of their phone dimming in their hand. There are moments when someone discovers something about their own heart and their first reaction is not excitement. It is stillness. Because admitting what you feel changes what you can pretend not to know. Your soulmate had been telling themselves that distance had simplified things. That silence created clarity. That leaving certain words unsaid protected everyone from confusion. But today, those explanations began to feel incomplete. Their silence had not erased you. It had simply removed the conversation. There is a difference. And that difference became impossible to ignore. A few minutes later, they stood up and walked toward another room. They opened a drawer. This was not random. They knew exactly what they were looking for. At the bottom, underneath ordinary things that had not been touched in a while, was something connected to you. A small item. Perhaps a note. A receipt from somewhere meaningful. A folded piece of paper. A card. A gift. Something simple enough that another person might have thrown it away without thinking. Your soulmate had kept it. That alone surprised them. Not because they had forgotten it existed. Because suddenly they understood why it was still there. They picked it up. Turned it over in their hands. And another piece of the story fell into place. You had never needed enormous moments to become memorable. You had entered their memory through details. The way you noticed when they were distracted. The way you remembered something they expected you to forget. The way one conversation could continue in their head long after it ended. The way silence with you once felt comfortable instead of empty. Your soulmate sat on the edge of the bed or chair nearby, still holding that object. And something almost escaped their mouth. A quiet laugh. Not because anything was funny. Because they suddenly realized how long they had been pretending they were less affected than they were. This is where the story might seem as though it is heading toward a simple confession. But something bigger happened. And your soulmate still has not decided exactly how to tell you. Earlier that day, before the message arrived, they had received a call. They almost ignored it. The number was familiar, but the timing was inconvenient. They answered anyway. The conversation began normally. Someone asked how they were doing. Your soulmate gave the standard answer. Fine. Busy. Everything is okay. Then the person on the other end mentioned a change. Something in your soulmate's life that is about to move forward. It could be work. A family situation. A possible move. A decision they have delayed. A door that might finally open. Nothing frightening. Something meaningful. And somewhere during that conversation, the person asked your soulmate a question they did not expect. If this works out, who is the first person you're going to want to tell? Your soulmate did not answer. That silence lasted long enough that the person on the other end noticed. They repeated the question. And your soulmate's mind produced your name immediately. Not after considering several people. Not after making a logical list. You. That was what happened. That was the beginning of the big thing. Your soulmate realized that when life changes, their instinct still reaches toward you. Think about the weight of that. When something important happens, we learn who occupies certain rooms inside us. The people we want to celebrate with. The people whose opinion we want. The people we imagine calling when something goes right, goes wrong, or simply becomes real. Your soulmate had been moving through life telling themselves that whatever existed between you belonged in a quieter part of the past. Then one unexpected question exposed the truth. You were still standing in the future. They ended that phone call differently from how they began it. More distracted. More thoughtful. The person on the other end might not even have understood why. But your soulmate did. And now the message asking, "Have you talked to them yet?" made sense. The person who sent it had noticed the change in your soulmate's voice. Maybe your soulmate had mentioned you indirectly. Maybe they had paused when your name came up. Maybe someone simply understood them well enough to notice that one unfinished conversation was sitting beneath everything else. Your soulmate had thought they were hiding it. They were not. At least not as well as they believed. And now something in them began to move from reflection toward action. They opened your conversation. Yes. Your conversation. They looked at the last messages. They scrolled slowly. Not endlessly. Just far enough to remember the tone between you. There were sentences that looked ordinary now but carried entire moments behind them. A joke. A question. A simple, "Did you get home?" A message you sent when you remembered something they were dealing with. Maybe one message they never answered the way they wanted to. Your soulmate stopped there. They read it again. Then they pressed the box where a new message could be typed. The cursor appeared. Blinking. Waiting. Your soulmate typed your name. Deleted it. Typed, "Can we talk?" Deleted that too. Typed a longer message. This one stayed on the screen longer. I don't really know how to say this without making it sound bigger than I mean it to, but something happened today and you're the person I wanted to tell. They stared at it. Their breathing changed. Because seeing the truth written down made it undeniable. You were not simply someone they remembered. You were someone they still wanted to include. That is different. Your soulmate did not send the message. Not yet. They set the phone beside them and walked outside or toward a window, needing air, movement, anything that could make the intensity of the realization feel more manageable. The day was beginning to change. Light looked different. Sound seemed further away. Cars passed. A door closed somewhere. Someone laughed outside. Life continued without caring that your soulmate had just uncovered a truth they had been avoiding. And perhaps that made the moment more powerful. Nothing outside had changed. Inside them, something had. They thought about what it would mean to talk to you immediately. Would you misunderstand? Would you think they were returning only because something happened? Would the timing feel strange? Would you be guarded? Your soulmate knew those questions were fair. So they asked themselves one more. Am I reaching out because I need something from you? The answer surprised them. No. They did not want you to rescue them. They did not need you to solve the change happening in their life. They did not want to place emotional pressure on you. They wanted something much simpler. They wanted you to know. Because your presence had once become associated with being understood. And when something important arrived, their mind naturally returned to the person who had made ordinary moments feel worth sharing. That person was you. This is the part your soulmate had misunderstood about their own feelings. They thought missing someone meant constantly aching for them. They thought if the feeling was real, it would always be loud. But what they discovered today was quieter. You had become woven into instinct. A song plays, and a memory appears. Something good happens, and they wonder what you would say. Someone makes an observation, and they remember how differently you saw things. They pass a familiar place, and for half a second they see an older version of themselves walking beside you. Not obsession. Not fantasy. Recognition. You mattered. And perhaps you still do in a way they have not given themselves permission to admit. Your soulmate returned to the phone. The unsent message was still there. They read it again. Then changed one line. I need to talk to you became, I want to talk to you. That small difference changed everything. Need can feel heavy. Want is honest. They wanted the conversation. They wanted to hear how you were. They wanted to tell you what had happened. They wanted to know whether the connection between you could exist without pretending nothing had ever mattered. And right as they were considering pressing send, another memory surfaced. One of the last times you spoke, there had been something unfinished in the conversation. A pause. A sentence that ended too quickly. A feeling both of you recognized but neither fully named. Your soulmate had replayed it before, but always from the same angle. They had assumed the silence afterward meant the moment was over. Today, they saw another possibility. Maybe the silence did not close the story. Maybe it simply froze it. That is the unexpected reframe. The big thing that happened was not some disaster forcing your soulmate back toward you. It was not another person leaving. It was not loneliness creating an illusion. Something good may be opening in their life. Something they have hoped for. Something that should have made them think only about themselves and their future. Instead, that positive change revealed who they still instinctively wanted beside them when the next chapter began. You. And suddenly your soulmate understood why the urge to talk felt immediate. They were not running backward. They were looking forward and realizing you were still part of what their heart pictured when it imagined sharing the future. The phone call had exposed that. The message afterward confirmed it. The photograph deepened it. The object they had kept made it impossible to dismiss. And the unsent words on their screen finally gave the feeling a voice. Your soulmate sat quietly for another minute. This time, the silence felt different. Less confused. More peaceful. They were not trying to force an outcome. They were no longer constructing 10 imaginary versions of how you might respond. They simply accepted something. You had been important to them. You still were. And pretending otherwise had not created peace. Truth did. There was gratitude in that realization. Gratitude for the conversations. For the ordinary memories. For the strange way certain people leave fingerprints on moments they were never physically present for. Your soulmate smiled at one of those memories. A small one. Maybe you once teased them about the way they always forgot something. Maybe you had a habit of asking one more question when everyone else was ready to leave. Maybe you remembered their favorite snack, a story about their childhood, the name of someone important to them, or a goal they mentioned casually and assumed no one had heard. You heard. That is what they remember. You heard them. And perhaps that is why, when something big happened today, the first person their heart wanted to speak to was not the person with the best advice. It was the person who had once listened. You. Your soulmate picked up the phone again. This time, there was less trembling in the decision. They shortened the message. No dramatic paragraph. No emotional performance. Just something real. Something happened today. You're the person I wanted to tell. If you're open to it, I'd really like to talk. They read the message once. Then again. Their thumb moved toward send. Whether that message reaches you today, tomorrow, or after they gather one last piece of courage, the important part has already happened. Your soulmate stopped denying the conversation they want. And that matters. Because future possibilities often begin long before anyone sees them from the outside. They begin when a person becomes honest with themselves. When they stop labeling every feeling inconvenient. When they realize that reaching out does not have to mean repeating the past. Sometimes it means honoring what the past revealed. Sometimes it means saying, "You mattered to me, and I finally understand how much." Sometimes it means opening a door without demanding to know exactly where it leads. Your soulmate is standing near that door now. Not with fear. With a surprising amount of calm. They do not know what you will say. They do not know whether the conversation will be long, emotional, simple, awkward, beautiful, or quietly healing. But they know they want it to be real. And there is one final thing they have realized. The reason they need to talk to you immediately is not because time is running out. It is because they are tired of letting meaningful things remain unspoken simply because speaking them requires courage. Something big happened. A new possibility entered their life. And instead of making them forget you, it made them understand your place in their story more clearly. You were not only connected to who they used to be. You became part of the person they imagined sharing good news with. That discovery changed the emotional meaning of everything. The silence. The distance. The memories. The photograph. The saved object. The unfinished message. None of those things were proof that your soulmate was trapped in the past. They were reminders that some connections remain emotionally significant even while life continues moving. And now your soulmate wants to discover what honesty might create next. Maybe the next chapter begins with nothing more dramatic than a phone lighting up. Maybe your name appears on their screen. Maybe theirs appears on yours. Maybe the first few seconds are awkward. Maybe someone laughs because neither of you knows how to begin. Then perhaps one person says, "I'm glad you answered." And everything becomes simpler. No impossible promises. No pressure. Just truth. Just two people meeting one another again from where they are now instead of where they used to be. Your soulmate does not need the future to be perfectly planned tonight. They only need enough courage for one honest action. One message. One call. One conversation. And somewhere beneath all of their hesitation is a peaceful realization they did not expect to find today. Thinking of you no longer feels like something they need to fight. It feels like something they can finally understand. You mattered. You still matter. And whatever happens next, that truth is no longer hidden from them. So if an unexpected conversation finds its way toward you, remember how quietly this entire change began. A phone call. A simple question. An old photograph. A saved object. A blinking cursor. Then one person finally admitting to themselves that the person they wanted to tell was you. And perhaps the biggest thing that happened today was not the news your soulmate received. Perhaps it was discovering who they immediately wished was standing beside them when they received it. That realization has already changed something. What they do with it next may change even more.